Hi, this is Kylie with Fem and Flow. I hope you're all having a great day. I previously did a podcast on the 9 different dimensions, and this is just such an interesting topic, and you could really just go on and on about this topic. And it's so interesting because it explains how our reality works, and it can give us that deeper truth and deeper understanding so we see the bigger picture and we don't get caught up in the trap of duality. And I see here how people get really caught up into this idea of religion, and people get caught up in the nuances, and this creates duality between two people. To really get into the truth, I think we need to go way above this whole idea of religion. I think religion causes duality traps, and we need to understand the big picture. My goal in sharing this information is really to empower everyone, empower you to know that you're truly sovereign, empower you to know that and that you seek and find God by going within. I want to share this truth to inspire you to seek the truth yourself because it's really confusing right now. We have all of this competing information. You really don't know who to believe or what source to believe. I think a lot of us at this point don't trust mainstream media and don't trust the government. So we're left wondering, okay, we have all of these other individuals speaking the truth or sharing ideas, but how do we know if it's truth or not? And once we learn how to connect to God by going within, once we really get in touch with that intuition, then we will actually start seeing truth for ourselves. It will start being unveiled to us. We are so divine. We are so connected to God. That's our true essence, is just pure connection to God. In this experience, we have this illusion of separation. But outside of this and what is actually resonating with truth and how it is supposed to be, is we don't have this veil of separation. We're just purely connected, purely sovereign, and we just innately know the truth. So I just hope to share this to inspire you to seek your own truth and to connect to God within yourself and to just understand the big picture, because I really think once you hear this big picture, it will probably resonate and you'll start remembering truth and remembering where you came from. So when it comes down to it, I just really aim to inspire and empower others to seek this truth so you can step out of this false matrix and this false illusion that's trying to keep us controlled so they can harness their power for their own agendas. We are sovereign, we are divine, they aren't. So we really need to remember this truth and remember this power so we can just step over all these traps of duality. And I talk about this in this experience. We have this idea of duality, polarity, separation, and those characteristics are unique to this experience. So once we remember that this is just a human experience and we are spiritual beings, and those are some of the characteristics of this dimension and this experience, then we can start to remember the truth. And this is that idea of escaping the matrix. So now I'll just go over a quick overview of the 9 dimensions that we can currently access energetically. I talked about this in another podcast, but I don't think I summarized it like I'll do here. So also I put in the podcast description a link to what I'm about to talk about. I have a podcast materials Google Drive, and I have a picture of what I'm about to talk about. So if you wanted to pull that up and follow along, that might be helpful. Or if you just wanted to take a look at it, come back, or just look at it later, whatever you prefer. So I talked about it in my last podcast, but there's actually 27 dimensions, but I won't even get into 10 through 27. I'm just going to focus on 1 through 9 because that's what we can currently access energetically. I'll start with the ninth dimension, which is a black hole that creates a universe. And like I mentioned in another podcast and in one of the photos in my Google Drive, there's actually infinite numbers of black holes that creates a universe, and this is the structure across all of them. The ninth dimension in this 9D vertical axis, this is the source of time. And we're viewing these dimensions 1 through 9 as a vertical axis, if that makes sense. The picture in the Google Drive might lay this out better. But even though in the picture there are separate dimensions, like I mentioned in another podcast, the energies of the different dimensions are actually all layered on each other. And then in experiences outside of this false matrix, where we can fully access these different 1 through 9 dimensional energies, that's when we have these experiences of full freedom, of bliss, of the archetypal heaven. But then in this false matrix, like I mentioned a lot, we're actually cut off from anchoring in these energies. So in the picture, even though they're all separate, view them as all energies layered and combining with each other. In Barbara Handclaugh's book, The Alchemy of the Nine Dimensions, it says about the ninth dimension that it is a spinning gravitational nucleus that manifests itself in time waves, which creates events on Earth. The book also talks about how a black hole forms when a large star experiences a rapid gravitational collapse and gets sucked down into a funnel, which is shaped by the curvature of space-time. It gets steep as the density of matter increases. Once matter is sucked into this funnel, it is crushed into intensifying density. Yet, since matter is energy, it becomes a singularity, a point of zero size, and then it reappears in a different universe. It also talks about what happens in the different universe it creates, and this is a white hole, which you can think about as a new universe. If you do want to connect this back to the dimensions 10 through 27, in another podcast, I briefly talked about it, and I also put in a sketch in my Google Drive podcast materials folder. And I think in that sketch, I don't have it in front of me, but I think I just grouped 10 through 27 as non-physical, no beings live here, and it's what we consider singularity. But to be more correct, it's more like 10 through 27 are basically in that funnel I just talked about. And it's more like approaching the point of singularity, but it's right there. It's in that funnel of that black hole that I'm discussing. Now we'll move on to the eighth dimension, which is God, the divine mind, pure source energy, and pure light. On a very high level, the universe is all made out of propagated light. And this stems from this pure source energy, God energy of the eighth dimension. We can even see this reflected in the Bible where it says, in the beginning, God said, "Let there be light." Darkness is not a thing within itself. Darkness is just the absence of light, because light is truth. So in that sense, outside of this experience, it's just love and bliss and light. There's not evil and darkness outside of this experience. We only have darkness in this earth experience we're in because of this concept of the false matrix. Outside of this, it's all light, bliss, love. And you truly have power and divinity when you are connected with light, with love, with source energy, with God. And we'll get into that, but those are all aspects of the fifth through ninth dimensional energies. So therefore, evil or darkness, they're cut off from fifth through ninth dimensional energies. So they actually have no power. They just want to scare us. They just want to control us with manipulation and fear. And I say this a lot, but just always remember guilt is the basis of manipulation. So anytime you start feeling guilty, take a step back, throw up a red flag, and say, okay, what is actually happening here? Is someone trying to guilt me, to manipulate me, to get me to fall in line with their plan, with their agenda? And also, when you start feeling fear, also throw up a red flag and take a step back. Cut off any emotional energy you're giving. Don't give any fear. And ask, okay, why am I feeling fear towards this? And that's also probably tied to control in the form of manipulation and guilt. Basically, any time now I hear narratives being fed to society that have any sort of guilt or any sort of fear around it, I know there's some agenda behind that. The biggest source of profit for this dark global elite that I talk about a lot is war. Call it the military industrial complex. This is how they get so much money, and it's basically just money laundering to fill the pockets of the global elite. But how do they get us supporting this? They put up on mainstream media, they put up on the news all of these images and all of these narratives that make us feel fear, make us feel guilt, that maybe feel guilt, thinking, okay, we are safe here and look at what's happening in XYZ country. Guilt. Okay, we have it good. Yeah, we should support them. Yeah, we should send our tax dollars. Think about how much of our tax dollars are going overseas. And hey, this is literally just a way for them to send our tax dollars overseas, launder it, and then fill the pockets of these politicians that are going to fall in line with the narrative of control and do what this global elite group says. Because even the politicians, the celebrities, these people who we see on mainstream media, they're just the puppets for the true global elite that are controlling things behind the scenes. Okay, that was a little tangent on how darkness is not truth, light is truth, but darkness is the absence of light. And before I move on, I should add that all of these dimensions, they're not separate from each other. It's not like, oh, you pass a level gold star, you move up to the next dimension, which is more blissful. No, it does not work like that. All of these dimensions are actually energetically just layered on top of each other. And I think it'll make sense more as I go through it. But just keep in mind, all of these all interact with each other. And I've talked about it on previous podcasts, but all of these other experiences that we archetypally would call heaven, they're actually also physical, but they are just completely open and resonate totally with this fifth through ninth dimensional energy. Why we are experiencing what we are on this earth experience is because we've been cut off from fully accessing this fifth through ninth dimensional energies. And also, you can be living in this third dimension of earth, but you can resonate with other dimensional energies at a deeper level, if that makes sense, and not be cut off like we are. And that's why animals are so pure and loving, because they fully resonate with the fifth dimension, which is love, which I'll talk about. I don't know if that's kind of confusing, but it's all what your frequency is vibrating in resonance or in harmony with. Hopefully that makes sense. So basically, humans in this third dimension of Earth, the global elite, have actively done things to cut us off from harnessing in anchoring in fifth through ninth dimensional energies. And I talk about it in my last podcast on ways they prevent us from harnessing this energy, and I'll talk more about it here. But I just wanted to lay all of that out so it fully makes sense as I talk about it. And I wanted to touch on it just in case you haven't heard that last podcast. I want to help this episode make total sense. I already mentioned how the eighth dimension is God or the divine mind. And at this level, it's just pure God energy, pure source energy, the great mystery. And then in the dimensions below this, this is where this divine order of this God energy and this pure source energy start to fall into order. And all of this divine order creates the universe and creates all of these experiences and creates harmony. Just think about how here we have mathematics, quantum physics, and classic Newtonian physics, among others, but those are just a few. But all of this shows the divine order of God. Then we have the seventh dimension, which is sound vibrations. And in the Bible, it says, and in the beginning there was the Word, and the Word was God. And think about it, I've mentioned it before, but the word is what you speak. When you speak, it's actually just sound vibrations. So this aligns with this 9D dimensional axis. We have the eighth dimension, which is God, the divine mind, and pure source energy. And then we go down to the seventh dimension, and it's sound vibrations. Have you seen the videos where people put tiny little pebbles on the surface, and then it shows how different sound vibrations create different sacred geometry and different geometrical patterns in the pebbles? This is a great illustration of how the sound vibrations of the seventh dimension then create sacred geometry of the sixth dimension. And also, people talk about how water has a consciousness and how water can imprint ideas. And this is just the vibration. And once that freezes, you can see the geometrical patterns in that water. And the same with a snowflake. If you look at a snowflake under a microscope, you see that that water, because of the sound vibrations, it creates a beautiful geometric pattern. So the sixth dimension is sacred geometry. And the seventh dimension sound vibrations creates the sacred geometry and the geometric forms and geometric patterns of the sixth dimension. And remember, all of this is very high level. In my last podcast and in this podcast, I'll get more in depth into what this actually means for our reality. Then the fifth dimension is pure love. It's 528 hertz when it comes to frequency, which is known as the love or the miracle frequency. It's also the frequency of DNA repair, a frequency that can bring positive transformation, heal your golden chakra, and bring about whole body cell repair. So let's think back for a second, because this is really cool. So the fifth dimension is love. It's a specific frequency, which is 528 hertz, which is also known as the miracle frequency. And as I mentioned, the eighth dimension is God or the divine mind and is pure source energy. And it creates order by these different dimensional orders, if you want to call it that. Sound vibrations of the seventh create sacred geometry of the sixth. And then we get specifically into the fifth dimension, which is one of the specific frequencies. I think that's really, really cool. So think back to what I said about we can see sacred geometry reflected in snowflakes because snowflakes are water and the sound vibration creates beautiful, beautiful fractal patterns and sacred geometry and geometric patterns in the snowflake. And you see that when you look under the microscope. So think about Earth and our body and the connection of water. Earth is about 71% water, and our body is about 50 to 75% water. So, water is hugely affected, and sound vibrations are reflected in water. And actually, the entire universe and space is full of water. And this is how that energy of sound vibrations is carried and creates the sacred geometry. I saw a really great TikTok video and it talked about Dr. Leonard Horowitz. So it's pretty interesting because I had a lot of notes on this podcast episode already and I had planned to record it another day when I had more time. And I did the notes a few days ago. So this morning I was just scrolling on TikTok and I came across this video that I'm actually going to talk about it because it fits exactly in with what I'm going to discuss. And this video was a TikTok video. It was by the account Humble Truth Seeker, and it mentions Dr. Leonard Horowitz. This video talked about the 528 hertz frequency and it touched on the connection of water. It also talked about how the entire universe and space is actually water and how the whole universe's foundational force is sound, music, and vibrations. It mentioned how the perfect circle of sound has 9 different frequencies in it, and this is the heart of the universe's structure and existence. The solfeggio scale is that 9 different frequencies that make the perfect circle of sound, and the 528 hertz frequency is one of the 9 in that perfect circle. The scale of these 9 different frequencies causes the universe's creation and its ongoing existence. 528 hertz frequency is the miracle note of the universe, and that's pure love, and this is the heart of everything. In this video, Dr. Horowitz said there's something special about the greenish yellow color that we see reflected in nature. And this color is the center of the rainbow, and it's the color of chlorophyll, which is what turns sunlight into energy for plants to live. And he talks about how chlorophyll is very similar to hemoglobin, which is what carries oxygen in our blood. And it points out that the big difference is that chlorophyll has magnesium, where hemoglobin has iron. And this comparison shows a deep connection within nature, and it shows the connection between plants, animals, and humans. And it just shows how everything is really deeply, deeply connected, and everything in nature is linked. And he talks about how sounds and their frequencies are crucial in creating everything. The whole universe is influenced by the movement of electrons, and this is called physioelectricity. Everything that moves changes, and everything is driven by electrons. Everything is linked together. Every part of existence is deeply intertwined. Then the video showed an actual clip of Dr. Horowitz talking, and he says, "Water is donating electrons, the sun is beaming electrons in both sound and light, and the rainbow reflects that. At the heart of the rainbow is 528 hertz, and what's taking place is that chlorophyll molecule, which is receiving that love, literally vibrating it crystallography-wise, bioholographically into the structure that is selected by all of nature to be the principal energy-carrying pigment, and transforming pigment to transform the love of the sun into the oxygen we breathe." I thought it was crazy divine timing that I saw this video right before I came to record this podcast because it really helped me go more in depth on the love of the fifth dimension. I talked about it in my last podcast and I kind of discussed it in a different way. I knew about frequencies, but I never connected that love in the fifth dimension is actually 528 hertz, the miracle frequency. So that is so interesting and a really cool aha moment I had this morning. So now I'll get into the fourth dimension, which is the dimension right before we get into the physical. The fourth through ninth dimensions are all non-physical and they're all layered on each other, like I mentioned. And the fourth dimension is archetypes, myths, and the collective mind. And this is a veil that overlays the third dimension, which is a physical. And in modern terms, the fourth dimension sets the vibe of the third dimensional experience. So the fourth dimension is where this dark global elite have hijacked and taken control to try and attempt to disconnect us from anchoring in fifth through ninth dimensional energies. And we call this the false matrix. And they put all of their agenda and programming into this fourth dimension non-physical realm that sets the vibe for our experience. And they do this by setting up dualistic archetypes that keep us fighting against each other and keep us in lower frequency emotions. We're saying, this is evil, this is right, I'm right, you're wrong. And we really need to stop living and getting trapped in these dualities. We need to go above that. And we really need to see and understand what this global elite is trying to do. Because when we're stuck in lower emotional frequencies and we're stuck in shame, guilt, hate, those are some lower vibrational frequencies, then we're not resonating with the fifth through ninth dimensions or pulling that energy in. That's why I talk about on my TikTok a lot that we really just need to focus on living in love and gratitude, because even just doing that, how I talk about our torrential flow of energy and our body and how we actually create our experience here based off of the emotional vibrations we put out. That's how it all works. We want to be radiating love, so it's connecting with this fifth dimensional frequencies and pulling that energy back into the false matrix or our own reality. And that global elite do not want us doing that. They want us living in lower vibrational emotions. So we're not anchoring in these higher dimensional energies and breaking their false matrix of control. This is not some test from God to see how well you can do. It's not some test of who goes to heaven and who goes to hell. Really, the idea of heaven and hell are dualistic archetypes that were set by the global elite as narratives of control in the fourth dimension. They want us to fear the idea of hell, fear the idea of a devil or Satan, and by fearing it, we can be controlled easier. And they want to put all of these rules so when we break the rules, we feel guilt. And remember, guilt is the basis of manipulation. They want to use guilt and fear so they can control us. And they set up these archetypes as a way to create these figures. And they put this in the myth of the fourth dimension and the archetypes of the fourth dimension. So we have a figure that we're afraid of and that we're afraid of displeasing. We think we need to obey. We think this life is just a test, I guess. Catholicism has this idea of original sin and that we're born into sin. That's just absurd to me. That's absolutely absurd. So they're basically saying, you're born into sin, you're nothing, you're not divine, you need to go please an outside God. And the Old Testament talks about how this God is jealous and wrathful and how we need to please and obey. And then they say, if you please and obey and you follow the laws of the land, oh, then you will go to heaven and it's bliss and it's amazing. But if you don't, there's hell and there's purgatory. I just don't understand how people can't see through this, that it's a control and manipulation play. But really, I do think that once you start to understand this nine-dimensional axis and how the universe is propagated light and how there's God's source energy and there's all of these dimensions that create divine order to God's energy, I really do think that once you start to understand the nine dimensions, you can see past these lies better. And you can see them for what they are, which is just control. It's the global elite trying to control us in this false matrix because we're the divine ones. We're the ones who actually can connect and resonate with the fifth through ninth dimensional energies. And we can pull in that, anchor in that, and create total freedom, total bliss, and remember our divine power and remember that we're directly connected to God energy. And they're not, so they have to control us, manipulate us. So we are the ones that use our frequency, our energy, our connection to source to radiate those emotions that then, because of quantum physics and the connection I talk about, that is what creates the reality and that's what plays out. And they know all of this and they use it to create the reality here that they want. But actually, I want to add one more thing before we move on. I just said original sin is absurd, and I don't know how people fall for that basically, but actually, I do understand. I completely understand how people get wrapped up in this and fall for it because we are under this false matrix and we are literally programmed from birth. That's one side of it. One side of it is people being born into a religion and it's all they know. And I've mentioned it before, but if you're born into a prison and you have nothing to compare it to, you don't realize it's prison. That could be heaven for you. I don't know. It's hard when you don't have a comparison. But another aspect of this is because these ideas of organized religion really does weave in a lot of truth. And Jesus is also truth, and they use Jesus because they know Jesus, and some of these concepts will deeply resonate with us. Jesus's love deeply resonates with people in their hearts. So they use this truth, they use this deeply resonating feeling, and by weaving in a little truth to this narrative, then people grasp on and accept all of it as truth. There's a lot of good and there's a lot of truth in the teachings of religion, but it's just the whole control and manipulation part of it where they try to get us to be docile, obey, fear something, fear the idea of heaven and hell. That's where I'm like, no, just stop right there. But I wanted to go back to that because I do understand how people believe it. And a lot of religion and a lot of teachings are actually beautiful and people resonate with this deeply. So if it does resonate with you and you take the good parts and you take the love, that's great. I'm not saying throw it all out. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Focus on love and connect to God within, and then you will find the truth yourself. But we'll move on. Now we'll get into the third dimension, which is a physical dimension. And it's biological life, human, plants, and animals. And I think I mentioned it already. You can be in the physical in the third dimension, but you can resonate with higher dimensions. And that basically means that's where your energetic body and the frequencies you're putting out, that's what it's connecting to. And that's what it's anchoring in. I talk about it a lot in other podcasts, but we have an energetic body and our bodies are electromagnetic and our energy field is shaped in a toroidal flow, which is donut shaped. And this is ruled by sacred geometry. And our emotions are so powerful and they all hold unique frequencies. And if you look up the Hawkins map of consciousness, this shows that different emotions have different frequencies. So the frequency we're putting out by radiating an emotion goes out into the quantum. Like attracts like, it goes out into the quantum realm where there's waves of energy, which go along with this quantum theory that's called string theory. And as our emotional frequency goes to a wave of energy, that wave then transforms into a particle that matches the frequency of the emotion that we put out. And then our torrential flow of energy pulls that back into our reality, and that's how we create our reality. So that's why when I talk about in the fourth dimension that this global elite want to keep us living in lower emotions, that's because they know how we are the ones who create our own reality. And when we're creating from lower vibrational places, they're keeping us under control because we're not accessing the fifth through ninth divine energies. But like I mentioned, back to what I was talking about how as a human or an animal, you could be in the third dimension, living in the third dimension, but if you're living in higher emotions that have higher emotional frequencies, you can be living a life that's more resonating with the fifth dimension, for example. And even though you're living in the same dimension, your reality is different than others who are living in lower vibrations. In that sense, you can make your experience here either heaven or hell, all depending on your emotions that you're radiating, and that's tied to your perspective on life. That's why you can be really happy, but your family members or something could really be living in their own hellscape. I talked about it in my last podcast, but I talk about how quantum mechanics and quantum physics show that reality is not objective. Reality is observer dependent. And if you want to go more into that, listen to my episode on the quantum physics of manifestation and six-dimensional sacred geometry. The title is something like that. And I go more into it. I did mention it already, I believe, but I said that's why animals are just pure love. Like dogs, my dogs are absolutely pure love, and they just love you no matter what. You can be having a bad day and they just come in and shower you with love. And that's just how dogs and animals are. And that's because even though they're third dimensional beings, they are actually resonating with fifth dimensional energy. So just keep in mind that yes, we're in the third dimension, but you personally can be anchoring in higher dimensional energies and make your own reality more blissful. And doing so will actually help the collective because anchoring in more of that fifth through ninth dimensional energy is what will break the false matrix. And then the second dimension is physical, and it's Earth's magma core, which is minerals, crystals, energy portals, energy vortexes. And this is where seismic activity comes from. And this is where the energy that causes weather and natural disasters come from. And I mentioned it before in another podcast, but natural disasters are just the balancing of energy. For example, when we overexploit Earth for its resources, especially when we're exploiting Earth for profit, then Earth will just naturally need to rebalance its energy, and that's when we see natural disasters and seismic activity. And this is all set up where we can utilize Earth for its resources, but everything needs to be in balance and harmony. We cannot overexploit. We need to live in harmony with the earth. And then the first dimension is physical, and this is Earth's iron core. And this anchors gravity of this ninth dimensional axis. And I go more into this on another podcast, but the iron in the Earth's core and the iron in our blood, they have a connection, and we pulse along energetically with Earth. Absolutely everything in this universe is all connected. That's an overview of the 9 dimensions, and now I just want to get into some more specific things when it comes to the different dimensions and anchoring in the energy and talking about how the dark global elite attempts to cut us off from this energy. These are just some other things that popped up that I thought would be really interesting to talk about. I think this next part is interesting because you could write down things that resonate. And when you do these things, it will help you pull in this 5 through ninth dimensional energy that will help break this false matrix. Okay, I'm going to start with the 5th dimension. So I already mentioned that this is love. This is the 528 hertz frequency, the miracle frequency. And we anchor this energy in via our heart chakra. And chakras are just energy centers of the body. I mentioned on one of my podcasts about THC and how this actually can help you harness 5th dimensional energy. First of all, disclaimer, do not take this as medical advice. Don't even take this as advice. Use your own discernment, do what feels right to you. This is not the case for everyone. When I talk about THC, this will not be the effect for everyone, so definitely use your own discernment. Past trauma that's still stored in your body and that you haven't cleared can actually cause THC to have very different effects than what I talk about here. So when I talk about this, keep in mind this is for healthy when you've cleared all the trauma and you are clear-headed and you have a regulated nervous system. Stored trauma can cause a lot of interesting manifestations in your body. This is for fun and entertainment purposes only. I talked about THC in the episode where I was talking about what alcohol does, how it shreds our energetic body, and it really cuts off that creative energy and how we create our own reality. And we actually become way more susceptible to this dark elite control narrative. So I go over all of that in another episode. I won't go over that now, but I will mention a little bit about THC again. So I mentioned in the last how it actually connects us and anchors in 5th dimensional love energy. And it really puts you more into this divine feminine energy. And THC can help you open your heart chakra. And it's not just while you are actively feeling the effects of the THC, it actually just opens up channels to the 5th dimension. Use this more like a sacred medicine. Don't use these things I talk about as party drugs or use them every day. Definitely approach it more like a sacred medicine, a sacred ritual. Because, like I said, you don't need to actively be feeling the effects of the THC to open up love of the 5th dimensional energy. You can do it once and it will open up the channels. And the global elite knows this, and that is why we have THC federally illegal. It's only legal in some states, and there's all of these different stereotypes around THC users. And anchoring in this 5th dimensional energy will really cause you to have feelings of love, peace, and gratitude. And you can definitely feel it when your heart is open and you're channeling this 5th dimensional energy in. You'll feel this big feeling of love, gratitude, peace. Sometimes it's an overwhelmingly positive feeling that it brings tears to your eyes, and your heart will just feel so magnetic and expanded. And when you feel that, you know you are anchoring in this 5th dimensional energy. And another way that you can harness this 5th dimensional energy is gratitude journal. And when you do this journal and you write down the things you love and that you're grateful for, don't just quickly write it down. Actually think about it, sit in these feelings, and just really, really feel it in your heart. A gratitude journal is the first time I really felt this energy being anchored in, because I felt that overwhelming sense of love, gratitude, and peace. And it definitely brought tears to my eyes. And I felt my heart so magnetic and like it was just so expanded. And that's just energy. You know, you are anchoring in energy with your heart chakra. And you can also meditate on these feelings, and that's really powerful. And definitely be cognizant of this feeling and get in touch with it. Because definitely be with people and pets that make you feel this way. You want to be with people who make you feel really good, really expanded, like your true, authentic self. And while you're with these people and these pets, just think of all the things you love about them and why you're grateful for them. Another way to pull in this fifth dimensional energy is having sex with someone you love and having an orgasm. Think of that blast of love energy that comes with an orgasm. That is literally like, oh my gosh, like from another dimension. Like nothing compares to that energy surge you feel with an orgasm. It's really, really powerful. And I talk about it in a previous podcast about how on this experience, we have all these distorted ideas of sex and love. And they get us from both aspects. They get us from religion. Religion creates extremely distorted feelings and views around sex and puts a lot of guilt with that. And this guilt, I've seen it even last after people are married. And then they still have these feelings of guilt around it. And that is cutting off that fifth dimensional energy. And then I talk about it also. The other pole of that is the entertainment in Hollywood completely exploit this idea of sex. Sex should be sacred, and people should approach it with importance and understand this dimensional energy and love that sex should resonate with. And in recent times, sex has really been taken lightly in our culture, and people now have casual hookup culture and very casual sex. And I just think sex should be sacred and always be paired with love. Because then, if you don't pair it with love and that energy and that experience, then afterwards you might just feel icky about it or feel guilt like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. Basically, just remember that sex should be viewed more sacred, but not in that way that religion pushes. Just always keep sex resonating with love. It's really as simple as that. Now I'll talk a little bit more that came up in my head around the sixth dimension. And this is our physical body. And this is sacred geometry. And our physical body and our tidal flow of energy around our body is all ruled by sacred geometry. In movements with the body, like sports and fitness, create sacred geometry with our physical body, and that pulls in sixth dimensional energy. And I talked about it in a previous podcast, but it's all connected because our body doing these movements pulls in sixth dimensional energy, and then as more sixth dimensional energy radiates through our body, that burns fat, that builds muscle, and then our body actually aligns with the ideal figure when it comes to the sacred geometry of our body. And when we are aligned with this ideal sacred geometry for our body, we actually become like a beacon or a tower that's constantly pulling in this sixth dimensional energy. That was all in my last podcast also, and I went way more in depth into 6D and the sacred geometry of our body in another podcast, so I'm actually not going to talk about it again here. I'm not going to talk about it again here on this episode. So now I'll move on to the seventh dimension. The seventh dimension is sound vibrations, that actually form the sacred geometry of the sixth dimension. And think about how we talk and our words all send out vibrations. This is why it's so important to only say what we mean what we say. And you've probably seen it before, but our words are like spells, and that's why it's called spelling and cursive. We truly need to speak with integrity, only say things that we would want created and pulled back into our reality. Be aware what you speak out about yourself, your life, about others, because our words are way more powerful than we realize. And if you've heard of the book, The Four Agreements, the first agreement is be impeccable with your word. And the book says, speak with integrity, say only what you mean, avoid using word to speak against yourself or to gossip about others. Use the power of your word to offer love. Never use it to cause fear or pain in others or yourself. This is a little story that will probably resonate with a lot of people because I feel this comes up a lot. I was recently with people and they were complaining about something about themselves, a physical feature. And someone said, well, Kylie, yours is great. And I kind of felt like I needed to say something negative about myself to agree to kind of go along with the conversation and that it's kind of expected. I don't know, it felt kind of expected. And even someone sitting there said, well, she might not think that. You know, you're just trying to make your friend feel better. But afterwards, I thought, wow, that is such negative self talk. And we need to be impeccable with our word and speak with integrity and don't say negative things about yourself or others. So that was just one small conversation that I thought about afterwards and that I thought, wow, this probably happens so much. And this is just a small thing that we need to stop doing. Let's stop relating to each other about the things we don't like about ourselves. Kind of like Actually, it's like that scene in Mean Girls where they're talking about, I forget exactly how it goes, but they're all looking in the mirror and saying something negative about themselves. And then they look at Katie and she doesn't know what to say because she's not used to this girl group and how it operates. So she just says something about her cuticles. I think that's how I could have completely butchered that, but it's something like that. And this is another reason why music is so powerful. So, music in itself has its own frequency, but then even the words in the music have vibrations and frequency. This is why the music industry is such a huge, huge industry with so much money, because the global elite is controlling this. They know all of this and they want to control us with the frequency of the music and the frequency of the words in the lyrics. So, really be careful of what music you're listening to and which lyrics you're singing out. I don't say thoughts create our reality because if we have a healed nervous system, we can just step back and be the observer and have a thought without tying an emotion to it. And that's ideal. We want to be able to just be the observer. And we can make observations, but not be reactive. We really need to be in control of our emotion. It's kind of similar with words because how I talked about words are more powerful than we think. They're actually only powerful when we tie an emotion to them. But if you have an emotion, like if you're angry, and then you say words that are angry and they do have emotion behind them and you're like yelling at someone, that is all then way more powerful than if you just had the emotion but worked through it yourself. So if you have emotions come up that you don't love and that you don't want to resonate with and create your reality on, just don't act on those emotions. Don't react. Don't say something that you're going to regret later. Don't say anything that will then enhance and even activate those frequencies further. Keep it to yourself, calm down, do some shadow work or some journaling, write it down. You can write it down and it won't have an impact. Just write it down, get to the bottom of the trigger, why you're feeling that way. Forgive yourself, forgive others, just don't speak it into existence. Just work through it and don't speak it out into existence until you've gotten over that big emotional reaction. Because most of the time, when you speak out, when you're having those intense emotions, you regret it. You wish you never even said that once you've calmed down. But then by that time, if you've had that emotional reaction and spoke it into existence, it's just really enhanced those low vibrations. But don't panic if you've been living this way, because I talked about this in another episode, but lower frequencies vibrate slower and higher frequencies vibrate faster. And this correlates to the speed in which the things will manifest or be created in your reality. Lower frequency things will be created at a slower pace, and higher frequency things will be created at a quicker pace. So don't panic, keep this in mind, but now you know this information so you can change your behavior and your habits moving forward. But on the positive side of things, if you're feeling feelings of love and gratitude, tell the people you love, tell people why you're thankful for them. And then definitely use your words to enhance that frequency and that response. And the energy center that's associated with the seventh dimensional energy is our throat chakra. And similar to what I just said, if we have a loving opinion or wisdom to share, don't be afraid to share it. When we share these ideas, it sends out energy, and the more energy put behind these ideas causes it to gather momentum and make change. And never think you are too small to have a voice or that you're too small and your opinion doesn't matter. Now I'll move on to the eighth dimension. And this is God, source energy, and the divine mind. And this is pure source energy, pure God energy. The eighth dimension, when you're connecting to that, it's just pure connection to source. And connection to here, that's where your intuition comes from. And when you're connected and in resonance with the eighth dimension, that's when that veil of illusion comes off. You can see clearly and you just innately know truth. You know the truth. You're no longer deceived. There's no veil over your eyes. That is connection and resonance with the eighth dimension. And you can connect to the eighth dimension when you're in that meditative flow state. And that's when your brain is in gamma waves. And when you're in resonance and anchoring in the eighth dimension, that's when you can have the divine insights and these aha moments, and you might feel like you're almost downloading truth. And when you're fully connected to source energy, you are sovereign. You're self-sustained and you do not have needs. So, like I talk about in another podcast, this is just one experience. There's other experiences, there's other physical experiences where there's no illusion of separation, no control programmed into the fourth dimension. It's just complete freedom, bliss, and what we archetypally call heaven. So when we're in those experiences that are completely free, completely anchored and pulling in the fifth through ninth dimensional energy, that means we're fully pulling in and fully connected to the eighth dimension, God source energy. So in those experiences, we are sovereign and we don't have any needs. We feel whole. There's no part of us that needs to seek outside approval or need to go anywhere else for anything, because we're fully connected to God's source energy. We are fully whole. So in our human body, in this 3D experience, it's our pineal gland or our third eye that is our antenna that pulls in eighth dimensional source energy. And when you're anchoring in 8D energy, you can receive knowledge that transcends IQ and transcends any book knowledge that you've built here. It will appear to transcend reality, but it actually is reality. This truth has just been hidden from us to keep us under this control of the global elite. The true design is for us to harness this God energy and just innately know truth and innately just know because we are connected to the eighth dimension with our pineal gland. This is where psychic power and that spiritual knowledge that seems to transcend what we think is reality. And that's where it all comes from, that eighth dimensional energy. Everyone has unique spiritual gifts, and these are all tied to the pineal gland. And in Genesis in the Bible, it actually mentions Peniel. It says, "And Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved." So that's pretty interesting because I'm saying in this episode that the pineal gland in our third dimensional body is what connects us to the eighth dimension, which is God energy or source energy. And in the Bible, it says the place of Peniel, Jacob saw God face to face. So I think that's a pretty interesting comparison. Okay, again, this next part, not medical advice. Don't listen to me. Use your own discernment. And this next part, like the stuff I mentioned about THC, if you have unhealed trauma in your body, or an unhealed, dysregulated nervous system, this won't apply to you. You definitely need to do shadow work, get past any trauma, get past that fight or flight response that comes with an unhealed nervous system. You need a healed nervous system for this next part to apply. And also, similarly to what I already talked about, this next part, view it as a sacred medicine, not as a party drug. But if you have a healthy, functioning pineal gland and you take psilocybin magic mushrooms, this will help you anchor in eighth dimensional energy. And this is why people have spiritual experiences when they're on magic mushrooms. And this is also why studies show magic mushrooms can help you get past PTSD and trauma. It boils down to the connection to the eighth dimensional energy. And let me clarify this a little bit because I just said if you have unhealed trauma, these things might not apply to you, but then I talked about how magic mushrooms, psilocybin can help you get past PTSD and trauma. The studies show that psilocybin can help you get past trauma, but this is more in a controlled setting, and these people know what to do to help you go back, understand the trauma, understand the trigger, and get past it. I'm talking about if you just do it at home on your own. If you have that unhealed trauma in your body still, you might just have an experience that doesn't align with the really expansive, connected feeling that I'm talking about. You might remember your past triggers or have memories like that. But if you have taken this and you've had feelings you don't like come up, this may be a sign that you have some trauma stored in your body that you actually need to work through and release. And you don't need to go on these insane hero doses of magic mushrooms. You can actually get really great effect by just microdosing. But again, this is not medical advice. This is illegal. So do not listen to my advice. Disclaimer. The pineal gland produces DMT naturally, and this causes our intuition to kick on easier. And like other things, the global elite know all of this, but they want us under their control. So they not only hide this knowledge, but they also poison us. so our pineal gland is not healthy and functioning. They are literally trying to cut off our divinity and trying to cut off our direct connection to God. They also try to brainwash us with this God poison. All of these ideas that God is outside of us, God's someone we need to seek out, please, and obey. This is all part of the plan to make us docile, fearful, manipulated. And I will say this many, many times because this is something to remember. Guilt is the basis of manipulation. And hey, Catholic Church, this is a direct call out. Can we just talk about really quick how wacky it is that the Catholic Church has its confessionals? And if you go in and confess your sins to the pastor or the preacher, or whatever the Catholic call this person, that you will be forgiven. It's actually crazy. And actually, if you think about it, there's definitely a connection from that to this, how the dark elite handles their business. Look at Epstein and the stuff coming out about P. Diddy. They want to get blackmail on people so they can control and manipulate them with that blackmail. And when you're confessing your sins to a preacher, because the person confessing has guilt about it, and they have all this guilt and they think if they just tell someone it will help them. If it's really bad stuff, then that person, that preacher is getting blackmail on you. I saw in a TikTok video recently, Tucker Carlson was talking to Joe Rogan, and he talked about how he made the connection that evil of the world goes after weak people. And it's weak people that are in leadership because they're the ones that can be blackmailed and controlled because they have done things that have allowed them to be blackmailed to this level. So that's just some interesting connections and some interesting insight to keep in mind. That was a little side note. Now I'll get back about the pineal gland. So here are some ways that the global elite harms our pineal gland. The first way is with fluoride. It's in our drinking water, and I don't know if you did this growing up, but in the public education system that I went to, they had us swishing fluoride in a classroom once a week. So weird to look back and think about that. So weird. Bizarre. So I stopped using fluoride toothpaste. I use Bite fluoride-free toothpaste bits. And I filter my water with an Aquasana water filter. It filters out all of the bad stuff and then it remineralizes the water. Okay, the next thing is alcohol. It's beyond terrible for our pineal gland and it harms it so much. And not only is it harming our pineal gland, but then it's hijacking and shredding our energetic body, and that's stopping us from anchoring in the 5th through 8th dimensional energy. And I talked on my last podcast about alcohol, but one more thing I want to add about it. It also hijacks pulling in the 5th dimension of love energy. I talked about how sex and orgasms are really great ways to harness and anchor in this 5th dimensional energy. Think about alcohol and party culture and college culture and hookup culture. Alcohol is a huge facilitator for the casual sex movement and hookup culture. People might drink too much, have sex with someone, a stranger, and have guilt around it because they were drunk and under the influence. And they definitely weren't making that decision based on love. It was because they were drunk. And this just all hijacks 5th dimensional energy and really skews our idea of sex and love. I'll mention it again here. I mentioned it in another podcast, but alcohol culture is just so huge in our society, and it's one place to start. People should look at their habits and understand that giving up alcohol is a really great place to start if you want to start connecting to these higher dimensional energies and seeking truth and breaking out of this false matrix. So I talked about it before, but I'll mention it here just because it's so important. I mentioned how the sixth dimension is sacred geometry, and our tidal flow of energy and our electromagnetic body are both ruled by sacred geometry. And this is how we interact with the quantum, and we create our own reality with the system. And alcohol shreds this energetic field, and it stops creation of our highest reality, and it hijacks and breaks your energetic boundaries. And this causes you to be bombarded with outside energy. And this whole system of it collapsing and shredding your energetic field, that's when you're actively drinking and when you're even a little bit hungover. And think about also when you're hungover, you're probably not getting the movement you need. And even if you work out, you don't pull in that 60 energy because the alcohol and the hangover, it has shredded your energetic field until you get back to feeling better. And you're probably also eating junk food or fast food if you're not feeling well and feeling hungover. I know that's how I would feel when I used to drink. And then that's just harming that sacred geometry of your body when you have habits like that. And when you keep it up for a period of time, then it starts distorting the sacred geometry of your body. And like I said, when we're in the ideal sacred geometrical shape, when it comes to our physical shape, we're like a tower just constantly harnessing in 60 energy. Then, just to layer on another level, I talked about the seventh dimension and how it's sound vibrations. And then think about that. So, if we are drinking at a bar and our energetic field is shredded and our energetic boundaries are down and we're just being bombarded with outside energy, we may not be speaking with integrity and we may say things we don't really mean and we may say things we regret. And think about it this way, it might not even be necessarily bad things, but it might be things that don't fully align with your character. Like even drunkly saying you love someone, it may hurt them in the long run, and it may cause them pain if they feel differently than you feel the next day. And you might be like, oh, I said that, but I didn't really mean it. And then now I'm going to ghost that person because they have feelings that I don't have, and now I don't know how to react. Just think of all these bad scenarios alcohol puts you in. And then back to music and lyrics and the power of words and the power of frequency and sound vibrations. Think of all the music that's played at bars and clubs. All of these lyrics and frequencies are very, very purposeful. And usually those top songs that are played at clubs are the ones being actively pushed by the music industry. They're the ones picking the top tracks in what's going on the radio. It's the music industry picking this. And there's things called streaming farms where there's just a full room of devices just constantly streaming the songs they want to be hits. It's all a facade. And it's all the music industry picking which songs and which artists are becoming the top artists and having the top hits. So they're definitely picking the songs and the lyrics they want you to be singing. And they're picking the songs and the lyrics that are being played at bars while people are drunk and their energetic fields are down. It's all planned. Like, just think, when your energetic boundaries are down and this music's playing, what is this actually doing to you? Okay, but that was a little tangent on alcohol. Now we'll get back to the list. So I mentioned fluoride and alcohol both harm your pineal gland. Also, the toxic food industry. And this even goes beyond fast food. It goes into the pesticides on our fruits and our vegetables and the antibiotics in meat. It's a crazy world out there. Then another thing they do to harm our pineal glands is the pharmaceutical industry. There are certain drugs and pharmaceuticals, but I won't get into that. Okay, that was some of the ways they harm our pineal gland. Now I'll get into the positive side of it, and here are some things we can do for our pineal gland health. Okay, already mentioned it. Avoid fluoride. Use fluoride-free toothpaste and filter your water. I like Bite toothpaste bits, and I like the Aquasana. Avoid alcohol. Eat as clean and organic as you can. Avoid pharmaceuticals as much as you can. Take Shilajit. It's a live resin full of trace minerals. And I like the Shilajit from the brand Symbiotica. And this decalcifies your pineal gland. And your pineal gland needs minerals to function. And just in general, for pineal gland health, your body needs to be properly mineralized. So some things I do, I like Water and Wellness, the glass capsules they have. It's spelled Quinton. I take that. I take Shilajit. You can scoop a little out and put it in your hot tea. Like I mentioned, I'm careful about the water I drink. I use a filter that filters out all the bad, remineralizes it. And then you can even put trace mineral drops in your water or sprinkle some Celtic sea salt in there. There's things you can do to add even more minerals. Natural spring water is the best, but you might not have access to that. And then Celtic sea salt is a great source of minerals. Another thing you can do for pineal gland health, and it's something I take, is Gotu Kola. And it's an herbal supplement. Gotu Kola is known as the herb of longevity. And I get the Organic India brand, and that website says Gotu Kola is known as the herb of longevity, speaking to the plant's abilities to relieve the fatigue and restlessness associated with stress and support overall quality of life. Okay, this next part is from tonicherbshop.com. The Hindus consider it a powerful herb for balancing and opening the crown chakra, which is one of the primary points through which intuition is believed to enter the mind and body. Gotu Kola is also said to act directly on the pineal gland. Taken long term, Gotu Kola may increase intuitive awareness, an idea that is certainly supported by thousands of years of anecdotal evidence. Yeah, this website talks about all of the benefits of this herb, and it says it has effects on mood and consciousness. And it mentions a lot of other stuff. Brain tonic, a lot of stuff actually, but I'll just talk about the pineal gland benefits. And that actually reminds me, I talked about how the 7th dimension is throat chakra and the 5th dimensional is the heart chakra. This is where we're anchoring that energy. Yes, the 8th dimension, pineal gland, is the crown chakra. Okay, but back to the list of things we can do for pineal gland health. We can also microdose, what I mentioned earlier. And this is not medical advice. I'm not advising you to do this, but if you were to, 50 to 100 milligram is a nice microdose. Even that small of a dose has benefits. Okay, another thing you can do, and this actually came up when I was talking about the 5th dimension and the chlorophyll, but this will help us with our pineal gland as well, and that's to have raw greens daily. I have been having a smoothie every day and putting 2 cups of spinach leaves in the smoothie, and it really makes me feel really good. And I've also taken this before, but with all of this information coming together in this podcast, it made me realize I need to start taking this again, is the Super Greens by Symbiotica. So I just ordered more of that. Another thing is cacao. Make sure it's raw fermented cacao. And I really like the Wildly Organic brand. And I I really love matcha, and I have a little bowl and a whisk and a sifter, and I make my cacao the same way I make my matcha drink. I'll boil some of my hot water from my filtered tap water, and then I'll use my little sifter, put in some of the raw fermented cacao powder, whisk it up. I'll put a little bit of organic half and half and a little bit of maple syrup in it, and it's really good. Okay, some other things you can do for pineal gland health is take MSM, you can take fish oil, you can take apple cider vinegar, and Symbiotica has apple cider vinegar pills that I take. You can also take maca powder and frankincense essential oil. You can put that in your diffuser or put that in a little essential oil stone by your desk or by your bed. And then amino acids, make sure you're taking amino acids with the full amino acid profile. I really like the brand Kion Aminos. I like the powder you put in your drinks, and I really like the berry and the mango. Both of those are really good. And I'll put that with really cold water in a shaker bottle. I've noticed the temperature really, really makes a difference. I don't like when it's just water straight from the tap. I like it really, really cold. So I'll put my water from the tap that's filtered, I'll put that in a jug or something like that and put it in the fridge. I just think it tastes way better when it's really cold. Another thing you can do is avoid sugar, but it's okay to have natural sources like fruit. Don't go overboard with this. Just try to avoid added and processed sugars. Another thing is matcha, which is ground up tea leaves. And I drink this every morning instead of coffee. And I just mentioned when I talked about cacao, you can get a little bowl and a whisk, and it's a really ritualistic experience in the morning. It's really nice. I just boil water from my filtered tap and use my sifter and my whisk to whisk it up. And then, similar to the cacao, I use organic half and half and then put a teaspoon of organic maple syrup in it. And it's very, very good. I'll put all of this in a list and put it in the Google Drive in my podcast materials link. So if you didn't write this all down, you can just see an easy list there. So I hope all of this was helpful. But just in summary, I went over the 9 different dimensions that we can access energetically. I talked about the characteristics of each and how they're all layered on top of each other, and how we need to be anchoring in this 5th through 9th dimensional energy, and that is what will break this false matrix. And when we fully resonate with the 5th through 9th dimension, that's when we are in what we archetypally call heaven, and this is pure bliss, and we have no needs and we're sovereign. And this is how we will live for eternity. And I also went more in depth on the 8th dimension because this is so important, because this is God and pure source energy. And I talked about our pineal gland. This is our antenna that pulls in 8th dimensional God or source energy. And when we're fully pulling that in, that's when you get that insight that transcends IQ and transcends the book knowledge you know. And that's when you'll have the truth unveiled, and you'll see through this false matrix of control, and you'll see through all the lies, and you'll see truth. And everyone has the power and the divinity to connect to this truth. So that's why I want to share this information, so you can actively do things, so you can start harnessing this in and get insight and truth for yourself. And when you're connected to that 8th dimensional energy, that's also your intuition. So this is extremely, extremely important, and this will give you so much power. So go download that document I'm going to share so you know all the things to start doing. But again, don't take my advice. This isn't medical advice. Use your own discernment. But really, I just aim to help everyone, to empower everyone. Everyone has the opportunity to fully be in resonance with their divine energies. So, all of this has been hidden from us. So, don't feel bad if you're doing things that harm your pineal gland or something like that. All of this is hidden from us. But let's share this information with others and start living aligned so we can start harnessing this energy in. And if you liked my podcasts or like any of them, please share them with friends, share them with loved ones. I just really want to help empower others. And also, if you liked it, please follow my podcast, download it, and listen every week. Again, thank you all and have a great day.